مساء الخير لكل مشاهدينا، مساء الخير لمشاهدي واتساب ميديا نتورك. مع كل هي في قصة ورسالة لامرأة ما بس نجحت على الصعيد الشخصي وإنما ساهمت بالمجتمع اللي هي عايشة فيه، أكيد بخدمة المجتمع اللي هي عايشة فيه. ضيفتي اليوم هي محامية الهجرة Laurie Tannous. I'd like to welcome you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
اوكي، رح نحكي عن مسيرتها اكيد بعالم القانون، وايضا رح نحكي عن موضوع مهم جدا واللي هو الاتجار بالبشر او الهيومن ترافيكينج، واللي وفقا للامم المتحده قالوا انه هو موضوع موجود بالعالم كله ولكن لا يتم الحديث عنه بشكل كافي. فخليكم معنا بحوار مع لوري طنوس محاميه الهجره، وبنتمنى نسمع اكيد رايكم وتعليقاتكم واكيد أسئلتكم. It's a pleasure to have the chance to get to know a person that has faced many challenges. Laurie Tannous is an attorney with vast experience in customs, immigration, and border security. She has found her purpose in helping immigrants by protecting them from trafficking and other border-related criminal activities between the United States and Canada, with an emphasis on Michigan-Canada immigration. It has been thanks to her passion for activism that she has accomplished so many goals in life. Laurie is also an active member of the Expert Committee on Types of Violence. Her current position includes Special Advisor, Vice President at Farrow, and her private practice as a cross-border attorney. And we'll be right back with Laurie Tannous.
The One, we are business consultants who equip leaders to lead at their highest level while building teams that work together and support their team and the leadership. We deliver customized business solutions that fit your company's needs, including business development and customized process solutions. Contact us today. Thank you.
Welcome to Heya. I'd like to welcome immigration attorney and a former border officer, Laurie Tannous. It's good to have you today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here, Hanan.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You know, I'd like you today to share with us, your road to success and the amazing work that you do on a daily basis. But before that, I'd like to tackle an important issue. It's one of the major issues that's happening in the world, and it's happening in our own backyard now. So tell me about human trafficking, which is, according to the United Nations, it is like it affects every country in the world, but it's not really talked about enough. So you were assigned basically to what do you call it?
Yeah, no, I've been, so as an immigration attorney, and prior to that I was a customs and immigration officer for 7 years, and so I've had, I don't want to say the opportunity, but the ability to work on various cases that touch certain elements of human trafficking for many years, and then yes, I was assigned a project where we decided we were going to focus some of our efforts and our resources on making it a priority to bring awareness, education, and outreach on human trafficking as a whole, especially in our region here.
So what's your definition of human trafficking from what you've seen so far?
Well, I think that oftentimes people get confused by human smuggling and human trafficking, and they think they're the same thing. And so sometimes with human smuggling, it can lead to human trafficking, but with human smuggling, there is oftentimes somebody that voluntarily is trying to come into a country illegally, but because they're running from the country that they're coming from, maybe because of war, because of crime, because of different things like that. Human trafficking is different because that person who is being trafficked never does so voluntarily.
No consent whatsoever.
There's no consent. This is against their will. In no uncertain terms do they want to be in that situation. So typically somebody has recruited them. So they've either given them a promise of some kind. They've said, hey, if you come here, and it happens to immigrants and to Americans. Okay, so it's a national and an international problem, right? So for somebody that's trafficked, let's say within the United States, it could be as simple as somebody at home, a child at home playing on their Xbox or their PlayStation, and somebody is messaging them who they don't know, who is trying to engage a relationship with them and trying to get their trust. It could be an older student who comes to them and says, hey, you want to go to this party this weekend? And there'll be lots of fun, and so there's different ways of recruitment.
But who are the most vulnerable ones for human trafficking?
Yeah, women for sure, and children. Men are also trafficked, boys are also trafficked, but we see oftentimes women and children are the most in terms of sexual exploitation and labor exploitation. So there are two differences, right? So there are people who are trafficked for the purposes of sexual exploitation, and then there are people who, let's say, are being held to work in factories or work
like
in,
forced labor,
inhumane conditions, and again, that could be men, women, children, but it does affect everyone. To say that there's one certain age group or one gender or one denomination or one... It's not.
What about organ removal? That's what I was reading.
Yes, so as well. So at times people are trafficked so that their organs can be harvested. So they can then take those organs and sell them on the black market. So that's another element that we're seeing that is different. And keep in mind that this is a billion-dollar industry. Okay, so the bad guys, the bad actors out there are making a lot of money by trafficking people.
Who are these traffickers?
It ranges. Sometimes it's organized crime, sometimes it's cartels, sometimes it's gangs, sometimes it's just people that want to make a living and they feel like, hey, you know what? I'll give you an example.
Yes.
If you have drugs, you sell those drugs. Those drugs are gone. They've been consumed. They've been used. If you have a person and you're able to sell that person and move them and traffic them all throughout different cities, different states, different countries, you're making money time over time over time. So it's an investment. I hate to categorize it like that, but that's how it's perceived in the sense that they're able to make money each time that person is trafficked. And so it is a lucrative industry. And it's one that, is, like I said, happening in every country in the world right now. I don't think that there is a place that's not touched by it.
That is, I think it's so scary, to think about it. And if I want to ask you about, what is the common, is it the more of sex exploitation or maybe labor, or both?
It is both. There are certain areas where we'll see more labor exploitation in certain third world countries where they don't have the same labor standards that we have here in the U.S. or in Canada.
So it happens more in those regions.
You'll see labor exploitation and sexual exploitation there.
Both.
Okay, but you'll see more commonly labor exploitation there because they don't have the same standards as we have here. Not to say that labor exploitation does not happen in the U.S. and Canada, because it does. But the difference is, and I want to thank you for having me on the show today, and thank
we've been meaning to do this for a long time.
Thank you. I know we've been talking about it for yes, we have.
Yes,
but
yes.
When you're able to talk about it, it lets people know that it's happening and that it's a bad thing, and it allows everybody to take part and to keep their eyes and their ears open, so that if they are somewhere and they say, hey, something looks funny about that, I don't think that person, has taken a break in 8 hours, or that person looks very tired. You know, there's instances here in Michigan at certain restaurants, at certain, you know, nail salons, certain places, and it's not one industry. It's like across industries.
It's across industry.
Yes.
You know, people are smuggled, you know, from Canada to USA through the border of Vermont and Quebec.
Yes.
And there are, you know, what's it called? Canadian legislators are being criticized, you know, for not really addressing this matter, you know, in a systematic way. Do you agree?
You know, I think if you were to make that statement 4 years ago or 5 years ago, I would say I wholeheartedly agree. We're not paying enough attention to it, or we're not doing everything that we can. Right now, I think that from a Canadian perspective, in terms of the enforcement of these types of activities across the border, we're seeing definitely more resources, more attention, more training, and focus on it. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It still is happening, but if you imagine the large number of people that are moved willingly across the border, and it's difficult. And I would say that even from Canada to the U.S. and U.S. to Canada, there are people that are trafficked both ways. And so it is happening at multiple borders, unfortunately.
Right, but the rest is kind of tiny here compared to the southern border, right?
Yes, correct. And so a lot of
it is sophisticated here as
well.
well.
It's happening here. It's just, you know, the difference is that here, traffickers have to get creative, meaning they can't just run across the border the way that they could perhaps maybe at the southern border, or they can't sneak over. I mean, I understand that the wall is coming up and there's other mechanisms, but for the traffickers that are crossing the border, the northern border, as we call it, they have to use different methods.
Yes.
Okay,
they have to be creative.
Yes, so that's, you know, and what's sad about that is that people are being forced and being stuffed into containers, into tractor trailers, into different types of boats. So it's something that is such a dangerous activity that's happening every day and right underneath our noses.
And you deal with this, right?
This is, so a lot of what I focus my efforts on now is to train companies, to train people, to say, hey, here are some things that you can do to you know, enforce if you see that something is going on.
Or to be on the lookout.
To be on the lookout, because there just simply aren't enough law enforcement or organizations that can keep track of what's going on around them, right?
But
so it takes everybody.
Yeah, but as you said, I think more and more industries, I read about airlines, I read about hotels, and now medical field as well, which is nice. They can at least alert authorities.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And it's really important. I think there's a role for all of us to play in it. But there was many years ago when I would be talking about this, and I think I was just telling you prior to getting started that I've traveled the world to talk about this issue.
Yes.
And
you do travel the world.
I do travel the world, yes. But there was a time when it was very taboo. This was a subject matter that if you would bring it up, and I would be in an audience, and people would, you could hear Hanan, they would go,
but what, like they can't accept it, or they don't believe it?
It's a combination of things. Some of it is that they can't believe that it's happening, because I'll say, it's happening here in your backyard, and I will give case studies, and I will give examples,
and
right?
they're just
shocked. Then I'll give them examples, and I'll talk to them about, here's how it could be happening to your children in grade school, in high school, in college. And so I think the fact that I'm bringing this issue home, in a lot of cases, it's really hard for people to digest, you know, to accept.
Yeah.
But
now
it is becoming much more of a mainstream topic where I can walk into places and people have a general understanding and say, what can I do to help?
Yes.
And I see a really big difference in the last few years of when I started talking about this to now, where everyone is willing to pitch in.
Like major change.
Yes.
So that's good.
So it's
I mean,
great.
when you bring awareness,
that
helps
most
a lot.
Certainly. Most certainly.
You know, some argue, or experts argue, that you know, the opioid epidemic really it's contributing to increase the human trafficking.
Certainly. And so, you know, as at the outset, I described to you the difference between somebody that is being smuggled into a country versus trafficked. And you said it correctly. There's no consent for somebody that's trafficked. But if you can imagine that somebody's being held against their will, sometimes they're held in chains, sometimes their documentation is taken from them. So even if they were to leave, they have no identification. And keep in mind that sometimes they've come from a different state, a different country. So for them, one of the methods that the traffickers use is they keep the victims drugged. And they keep them drugged so that it's harder for them to escape. It's harder for them to send a signal. I'm sure, you know, as involved as you are in the media, and you've heard stories of, you know, for those people that are forced labor, that they were sewing into the tags of the clothing that they were working on in these domestic factories, saying, help me, save me. And so, you know, in that case, they're not drugged because they need them focused, because they need to be working. Well, if you have somebody that is being exploited sexually, you know, they're keeping them drugged, right? And they're keeping them against their will. Well, when, and God willing, they are all rescued, but when they do leave that situation, they end up being addicted to drugs sometimes. And so in terms of your
problem
question,
to
another problem, right? So it's a vicious cycle. So to answer your question, yes, the opioid epidemic is only cascading, it's only growing because it's being used by people who sometimes don't even realize that, you know, it's not like they willingly said, I'm going to go and take drugs for whatever reason, right? They're being given those drugs to keep them sedated, to keep them in those circumstances so that they're easier to be held captive.
And to be manipulated.
Yes, of course.
Definitely, yes.
So by the time they do escape, they now have an addiction.
Yeah,
right?
And they might go back.
Correct. Correct.
Yes. I want to ask you, I mean, what is the penalty or the jail sentence for traffickers?
So that's...
does it vary?
Yeah, it does vary. It varies. So there was a time when, unfortunately, victims were being held criminally responsible because they said, well, this is like work of sex work or prostitute or escort. And the legislation in the United States and Canada has changed where now the victim is actually treated as a victim and not treated as a criminal. And so it does vary based on what kind of trafficking, how long, how many people were hurt. So there are variances, but the penalties are stiff and they are becoming stiffer. And we're quite happy to see that legislation has been overhauled for people that have been trafficked from a different country into the U.S. and into Canada. The immigration services of both countries have allowed for visas for trafficked victims. So in a case where somebody was brought here against their will, then trafficked, they now have, depending if they qualify, opportunities to stay in either country on a permanent basis. It's a great thing. It's a great thing because these people were taken from their homes, their families were threatened. You know, there's so many sad stories, but the fact that the United States government, Canadian government are taking the steps to try and you know, remedy these victims in the best way that they can is nice to see.
So do you think, like, how is it happening? Is it more trafficking, human trafficking from Canada to US or vice versa? Which one is
I think
more?
it varies, you know, it varies depending on the time of year. It varies depending on what's happening. And unfortunately, I hate to once again bring it down to economics, but it's supply and demand. So in the event where different events are happening, so sporting events tend to bring these types of things, Olympics, big car shows, anything like that where there's a large crowd, you'll see that there'll be an influx of people being trafficked into either country, depending on what's going on.
So how do we protect our loved ones?
That's a very
How do
good
we
question.
combat
That's a very good question. Well, you know, WhatsApp Media Network and you having me here talking about this, getting the word out there, that's part of it, right? So having, as I was telling you, I talk to my sons about it all the time. You know, I talk to my family, my friends. You know, I was telling you about the efforts that my boyfriend and I are taking to try and combat
tell us a
this.
little bit about this foundation.
Yeah, so we're looking at starting a foundation that basically gets the word out there. So Patrick and I have been focusing our efforts to try and get an understanding of where the need is, because there are foundations that help victims and there are law enforcement agencies that do their part. But this is something different where we're saying, how can we bring awareness from a corporate perspective, from a charitable organization perspective, and what can we all do? So definitely something still early conception.
So
I will fill you in.
You started with that.
We're working.
You already
on
started.
We're
You're working
on
it.
Yes,
I would love to help.
Thank
anyway.
you. Thank you. I love that. See, this is a great start. Yes.
And how do we combat that other than bringing awareness?
Right. So awareness is one part of it. having the people who are first responders, like you were saying, those in the medical field, the truck drivers, the hoteliers, all of these individuals who come face to face, sometimes knowingly and unknowingly, with either a trafficker or a trafficked person, having them trained to know what to look for. I did some training some years back, and it was the Department of Homeland Security that had me come, and we did some training here in Detroit. And it was interesting because some of the examples I was giving to the different officers on what they could look for, so just for a police officer, let's say, who pulls over, routine traffic stop, and there's a gentleman who's driving, or even a woman, and he says, I want to see everyone's identification. If the person who's driving happens to have all of the identification and they're not children, okay, that's an indicator. That's a micro indicator that, wait a second, why do these grown women or grown men not have their own identification? That's something that is a red flag, and it makes you say, let me look at this a little further. So the first step is the awareness, the second step is the training. So making sure that the people who, and it really, all of us should be trained. The way that we look for somebody who might be drinking and driving, who might be texting and driving, who might be doing things that could be dangerous to all of us, we should all be trained. And obviously the training is going to vary, okay? So there are some people who need more intensive training, others who might just need a general idea of what to look for, so that education is really, really key.
As a parent, what would you advise parents to look out for? Signs, anything, you know?
Well, if you ask my sons, Zach and Nick, they'll tell you that I drive them crazy because I'm super paranoid.
Too much, probably.
Too much, you know? They say, Mom,
you're in it.
But because we're in it, you know? And so some of the things that I'll tell them is, whether they're on Instagram, on TikTok, on Snapchat, you know, I say, be careful who you're adding, because a lot of these perpetrators, these bad guys, make it seem like there's somebody that's their age. You know, I've got the two sons, 16 and 14, and now I see that they'll go through their lists and they'll make sure that,
so they're more aware
so they're more aware for sure, you know, and so just being, having a keen sense of what's around you. You know, oftentimes people will say, well, I don't feel comfortable with my children going to a mall or going to a big place. Well, we can't shelter our children forever, but what we can do is equip them with the knowledge. So I'll say, look, if somebody's standing there and they're taking pictures of you, and you see the same person and they're following you, then you need to talk to you need to talk to an adult, right? So there's certain things that you can look out for, and we can teach our kids and train our kids on how to be safe, both in social media, but then also, you know, at malls, at movies, at places where there are going to be large crowds of people.
Right. Well, what about the signs, like, for if you see like your daughter is acting a little bit weird or something? What are the tips or the signs?
So if you, and I had done some, for sure.
Yeah.
I had, some of the training I've done as well has been to high schools, for example. And, you know, a mother said to me that her daughter came home with a very expensive designer handbag. And she knew that they couldn't afford that handbag, and she had no clue where the daughter got it from.
That's red flag.
Red flag. Okay.
Yeah.
If your daughter, you know, if the funds
That's
are not there,
the red flags. Yeah.
If the funds are not there to go out and purchase that designer handbag, and it's real, so it's not a fake, then you say, what's going on? Who got that for you? And they might say it's a boyfriend, right? Well, you need to figure out who your daughter's boyfriend is, right? And why is that boyfriend giving a $2,000 bag to a 15 or 16 right? So those are some red flags. If you see that they were extroverted, you know, going out, very active, either on social media or out and about, and they suddenly become introverted, that's a sign. If you see them starting to hang out with different people, so they're straying from their friends, they're pulling away from family. Now, there's obvious normal teenager hormones
but something abnormal.
But something abnormal that's different to your child. You know, those are some of the keys or some of the indicators to look out for.
Okay. Anything else you want to add on this particular subject, the human trafficking, so we can move on?
Yeah, no, I think we've covered a lot of what I wanted to talk about, and like I said, just letting people know that. If you have any more
tips, anything?
Yes, I'm trying to think of, you know, some of the things that we can look out for, and I think it's just important for all of us to be concerned citizens. You know, I think that we all play a part in it, and just keeping our eyes and ears open for you know, these signs, these indicators, the different places that we might be at, and so I think just being aware and not being afraid to report it.
Yes, yes. So before we take a break, I'd like to say that Laurie Tannous is volunteering some of her time to mentor one of our female viewers. So if you're interested, contact us on heyamentor@gmail.com. And we'll be right back with Laurie Tannous.
The One. We are business consultants who equip leaders to lead at their highest level while building teams that work together and support their team and the leadership. We deliver customized business solutions that fit your company's needs, including business development and customized process solutions. Contact us today. Thank you.
أهلا وسهلا فيكم مجددا ببرنامج هيا، وأنا مع المحامية لوري تنوس، واللي عنده أي سؤال للوري تنوس بليز يطرحهم علينا. طيب I wanted to tackle your life, your journey to success. You were born in Canada.
Yes.
Born and raised in Canada.
Yes, correct.
Okay, and you finished law school, but you finished your residency in corporate law. Why switch to immigration?
Well, when I was starting off university, so I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer. I was 10 years old and said I want to be a lawyer, but I always wanted to be a corporate commercial lawyer.
So you wanted to be a lawyer?
I wanted to be a lawyer, yes, all along. But I never wanted to do immigration law or customs or border security.
Yes.
I really wanted to just do corporate commercial business law. That's what, I grew up in a family who had immigrated from Lebanon, had small businesses that grew, and I saw the need, to try and just be part of the business from a legal perspective. When I was 18, I got hired, I needed a job, and so I got hired as a customs and immigration officer at the Ambassador Bridge for the Canada Border Services Agency. And so when I started there, I did that, initially it was just going to be a summer job. It was full-time, but I was going to stop. And then I was offered the opportunity to stay on full-time.
But you were working midnight shift.
Yes, so I had to figure out a way to work and go to school because I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. So I ended up staying there for 7 years. But I worked midnight so that I could go to school, do my undergrad in psychology, and then I did my law degree. So I worked the whole time while I was...
So you were going to school during the day?
Yes.
And working at night?
Yes, correct.
How was it like?
Crazy, to say the least. It was
because
very,
I know
very
if I don't have enough sleep, I can't function during the day.
It was very hectic. Those are some very tough days, I'm not going to lie. But I was very fortunate. The Canadian government was very understanding. My professors were very understanding at the University of Windsor. So I really had people that I was blessed with who understood that I was trying to balance both of these situations. Now, when I left customs, I had said, I am never going to deal with customs or immigration law
that would be
again.
the opposite.
Nope, I said, that's it. I remember I said, that's it, I'm done. And I had started off at a firm in Windsor, and in Canada, you have to article. So when you graduate law school, you have to, it's like, how doctors have their residency, it's the same thing. We have to, it's like you're a junior lawyer and you have to work under a principal who's senior in the firm. And I kept getting questions about immigration. And I said, no, I'm not an immigration lawyer. And I was being very firm about it. But because I knew about it, I had been the one enforcing the immigration laws, enforcing the customs laws.
So you had a lot of information.
So I had a lot of information, and within 4 months, I became a full-time border attorney, And so, I definitely have continued continued the business law and the corporate stuff as well, but it's integrated into the immigration.
So you started to like it eventually? Is that what?
I feel like, it's one
just
of these
grew on
things-
you.
It grew on me. I don't want to say I like it, but I realized that I was helping people, and I thought, oh, okay, well, I got into this in part to help people, and so let's see how I can continue. And so it was one of those things that I had so much information and knowledge that I felt I would be depriving if I wasn't sharing it.
But did it help being a minority? I mean, to be an immigration lawyer?
It helped, certainly, because having my parents who had immigrated, my family who had immigrated from Lebanon, it definitely gave me the ability to be compassionate, to empathize and to sympathize with people who had come whose English maybe wasn't that good. I could understand the Arabic language. I can speak it, but it's just very broken, so I won't, I'm not going to attempt.
Should I ask you a
No,
question,
please don't. Don't test me, not today, maybe next time.
Okay.
But let me practice a little more, but no.
Okay.
So yeah, it definitely allowed me, and what was interesting is that I didn't just have Middle Eastern clients. I had clients from all over the world immigrating to Canada and to the U.S., and so it did allow me, to say I understood the plight, right?
Okay.
Wanting to come and have a better life for your family, watching my parents do that, and so certainly it was an interesting journey to get to from there to then where I'm at now.
Sure, absolutely.
So.
Is it? I know it's easier to immigrate to Canada than immigrate to USA, right?
Yes and no. So there was a time.
Good question.
Yes, a very good question. There was a time when people would say, well, it's a lot easier to go to Canada than it is to the U.S.
That's what I hear all the time.
Yes, but
never looked into it.
Yes. Okay,
Yeah.
so we have a points-based system in Canada that you guys don't have here in the United States. So if you don't meet certain qualifications, if you don't have the right English scores and the education, if you don't have family in Canada, there's criteria that form the score that you need to be able to just be allowed to enter the pool. Okay. Now that's not how it always was, but that's how it is now for the last 5, 6, 7 years. Something like that.
So is it harder now than before? Are they more strict?
They can be, yeah, depending on the individual, right? So in the U.S., if you have been able to come here, let's say on an L1 or an H1B visa, or you were sponsored here by your family, you're able to come and live in the United States, right?
Okay.
In Canada, it's trickier. We have labor requirements that an employee and employer have to go through. If you're just a skilled worker, so you're educated, you're coming from somewhere, Lebanon, Brazil, doesn't matter where, you still have to prove that you're going to be able to contribute to the Canadian economy, to the Canadian society.
It makes sense, right?
It makes sense, yes. But no, it's really on a case-by-case basis. There are some days I'll tell you it's way easier in Canada, and then next week I'll say, no, it's easier in the U.S. So it just depends.
Well, I mean, you have an office, you have 2 offices or in Canada and 1 in Detroit, right?
Yeah, I split my time. Time, so I do have concurrent roles. So I am in-house counsel at a very large international customs brokerage.
Okay.
And then I am a special advisor at the University of Windsor at the Cross-Border Institute, where we focus on human trafficking, a lot of cross-border security issues, autonomous vehicles, different subjects like that. And then I have my own practice. And I do have an office in Detroit and then 1 in Windsor.
So working in both countries, what is the difference? I mean, as far as work, what is the difference?
I think for me, I feel like I'm a citizen of the world in the sense that, I feel very welcome here in the U.S. I feel at home here. I feel at home in Canada. There are differences depending on the industry that you're working in, really.
So it depends on the industry.
It really does depend on the industry that you're in. And I meet so many different people. And
so you cannot say like, oh, I love working in the U.S. more than working in Canada.
I love them both.
You just can't.
I can't pick. No, I love them both. Yes.
I know that you worked for an international trade law firm.
Yeah, in Farmington Hills, Michigan.
Yes,
for
in
7
America.
years. Yes.
Yeah, and you put a pause on your life in Canada.
I did.
Tell us how you benefited from this.
So it was interesting. The firm, Sandler Travis, they found me. I was speaking at an event actually on immigration, on different immigration benefits into Canada, and the COO of the company at the time heard me and said, I think you need to come and work for us, you know? And I said, I'm a lawyer, and I'm a Canadian lawyer, and I don't know that I'm going to do what you need me to do. And they said, well, we need somebody to fill the role of, you know, Vice President of Business Development, sales, globally. They had offices in Brazil, Mexico, all over the world. And I said, I'm not a salesperson. I'm an attorney, you know? And he says, no, you've got this great personality, and you've got a lot of contacts, and
so you can do it.
You can do it, and you understand the border, you understand the law in the U.S. and Canada and globally. And so I shut my practice down, and I came here and I worked exclusively for Sandler.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I did that for 7 years, and then, and you know, at that point, for personal reasons, I had to go back home. My mother was ill, and she passed away 7 years ago, and so that was very, very difficult on our family. But that was my reasoning, my need to go back home and really focus on efforts back home. And so I had the good fortune of being recruited by the two places that I'm at now. So
yes, we're going to go back to the human trafficking. Someone is asking about, is there a hotline for human trafficking?
There is. Yes,
that's a good question.
Through the Department of Homeland Security, it's called Polaris.
And it's called
Polaris. The Blue Campaign, and so I can provide the phone number after if you want to post it.
Or we can put it.
Yes, definitely. So you know, that's the one thing that if somebody does see something, if they're unsure, you just call that hotline. It's a 1-800 number, and you can just say, hey, I saw something, I'm not sure, or my neighbor, or, you know, you can, and they'll look into it from there.
That's good to know. That's perfect.
Definitely.
And another question, I heard Canada wants 3 million immigrants. Is that right? Is that true?
No, Canada is definitely open, you know, for immigration. Okay, so what do I mean by that? If you qualify, if you can meet the certain requirements.
This is what
yes.
Is there any specialty, right? Is there any specialty? I don't understand. Is there any specialty?
So it depends on the province. So in Canada, we have certain provinces that are more populated. So Quebec, Ontario, British Columbia, we have more people, but in other provinces, Nova Scotia, you know, different places where they need people, we need immigrants. And so depending on if somebody is willing to go to one of those provinces, then yes, it would be sector specific.
Okay.
And so it can be easier depending on the certain areas. We had a doctor shortage for a period of time, but it wasn't in Ontario, it was in more rural communities.
So if they're willing to go to that
if you're willing to go into
place,
those rural or those other provinces, certainly, definitely.
Okay, that's a lot of people, 3 million.
Yes. We opened up the doors in the last few years to, I think it was almost 20 million Syrian refugees after what had happened in Syria.
Yes,
and so
yes.
we have really, our economy has benefited greatly in the sense that we've had a lot of skilled individuals come, open up businesses, work in our economy, work in our commerce. So Canada is definitely open, but you have to be flexible because depending on where you want to go.
Yes, that's good information about that. Any updates on the new rules adopted by U.S. immigration?
Yes, just recently the public charge rule, and so this changes the landscape of immigration. And I was just speaking to a colleague of mine who exclusively practices in U.S. immigration law, and she filled me in and updated me, and we actually have a meeting on Friday just to continue discussing it. But just from a very, very high level, right now, if you've accepted any form of aid, any type of government support, you know, if you've got a low credit score, there's various things that now could disqualify you for an immigration benefit.
So you have to be very careful with that. So you
have to be very, very careful with that. And so they had discussed it. It was talked about that it was going to be implemented. It is now being implemented. So as part of your immigration applications, there are additional, an addendum or you know, a separate application that's almost 20 pages long in terms of questions that need to be addressed to determine if you qualify. So you might be able to qualify, let's say through your employer or through a family sponsorship, but if you don't meet those public charge requirements, it would disqualify your immigration benefit.
Yes, that's good. Any other things about immigration, any update on other things that people should know, you know?
Well, I think that, you know, oftentimes people get dissuaded or they think that, oh, it's just too hard, but it's not that it's hard, it's just that you have to be, you know, understand that it could take some time, that if you have the right professionals working with you, I definitely don't recommend people to do immigration on their own. I don't do my own plumbing because, you know what I'm saying? So I think that having the right people help you with your application, because one thing that I'm seeing more and more is that both in Canada and the U.S., applications, I had somebody that had, you know, referred a case to me, it was sent back because there was not an original signature in ink. The rest of the application was perfect. That was
Except
the only
that.
thing that was missing. And so they did it on
And
their...
it's the delay
It's the
and all
delay.
that,
And
yeah.
they had done it on their own, and they thought, oh, there was no reason, and they had
So
gone
it's
through...
better to give
Yes.
it to
Yes.
the professionals.
Certainly, certainly.
Always. Yeah,
Always.
I always
Yes.
say
Yes.
that.
No, and you know, for me, I don't handle certain types of law, so I don't do my own real estate. I have a real estate attorney for that, you know, so I make sure that, you know, I practice what I preach, right? So
Okay.
I think that people
sounds
would
fair.
be, yeah, you know, at a minimum I should, but, you know, I think that people would not be so hindered by the immigration process if they knew what was expected from the outset.
Okay,
Right?
yeah, that's good to know as well. We're going to shift a little bit unless somebody has a question about you. You got married young, you got divorced young, and you have two boys.
Two boys, yes, Zachary and Nicholas.
And you were obviously, while you were pregnant, you were going to school and
Yes.
you were working.
Yes.
Tell us, how did you balance all of this?
You know, I get asked that question often, and I don't think I ever stopped for a minute to say, how am I going to balance it all? I had...
How do you bounce?
Well, I decided that I had some goals that I wanted to achieve. I knew I wanted, you know, two boys. I knew that I wanted to be a lawyer. I
So
knew
you
that
knew
I,
you wanted
oh,
to
yes,
have
I
two
was
boys.
Yes, I knew exactly. So for me, I think I had, you know, and you hear about it more often. People will say, have a vision board. And you know,
I hear
write
that
out.
all the time.
Okay, so I've been doing that since I was very young, very young, before vision boards were even, you know, a term, right? So I basically said, what is it that I want? Where do I see myself in a year? Where do I see myself in 2 years? Where do I see myself in 5 years? And so I continually ask myself those questions. Then I say, okay, what do I have to do to get there? Keeping in mind that I've had to sacrifice a lot, right? So
Sure.
I don't watch TV. You know, there are certain things I just
You have
don't
to deprive yourself a little bit.
Just
for a while.
For a while,
For
yes,
a while,
yes. And
absolutely.
so, you know, I think it's just a matter of saying, this is what I want, and this is what I have to do to get there, and then coming up with a plan, and then executing on that plan.
But you have
And
to set goals.
you have to set the
You have
goals,
to set
because
goals,
otherwise,
that's
you know,
it.
people will say to me, oh my gosh, you have 3 jobs, you're a single mom with 2 kids, and you know, you have a boyfriend in the United States, and you live in Canada, and you've got your family, and you know, it's really a matter of saying, okay, I'm going to prioritize my time, and you really have to be a committed, disciplined time manager. And so that may sound like it's not fun, but I actually carve out times. Okay, here's times for, you know,
You put it on
an
your
outing.
calendar,
This is
too.
I do. I know it sounds crazy, but that's the way to get it done.
Yes, absolutely. So I was going to ask you, what would you tell mothers who want to go back to work or want to go back to school and they want to get education and they want to get ahead? You know, what would you say to them today?
You know, I had the privilege of having a mother who was an accountant, bookkeeper. She came to Canada at the age of 11 from Lebanon. And so for her, she wanted to work, but wanted to take care of the home and take care of her children and her husband. And so she worked from home, but made sure that she would work while we were at school. And then when we got home from school, she was there. And so I've adopted some of those same philosophies. So I do work from home often enough. The company I'm at, Farrow and the University of Windsor, allow me to have a flexible schedule so that I can try whenever I can to do my work from home. And so I think for working mothers or mothers who are not yet working, if they could look for industries or positions or professions that would allow them to work from home, I find it makes it a little easier. And I know that's not always the case, and that's not always, you know, able to happen, but I've often said if they can even come up with a plan where once the children are in school, and then they can work while the kids are at school. And
So there is a way.
Yes.
If there is a will, there's
a
a
way.
way.
Most
Always,
certainly.
yeah.
Most certainly. Yes.
Yes.
It's tricky. I'm not saying it's easy. I would never, you know, pretend that, you know, there are some days I need more makeup. I've got the bags, no sleep, right? So.
But that's okay.
It's okay.
That's okay.
That's what you do.
It
If you want it
happens.
bad enough, you work for it. And
If you want
get
it bad enough, I
Yes.
think you said something really
Yes,
important.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
because some people, I feel like some women are hesitant. You know, we want this. We want to go to school. We don't want to. You have to be really
Yes.
certain.
You do.
You have
You
to
do.
be certain. Absolutely.
And
yes.
you know, I couldn't have predicted where my life was going to end up, right? Nobody can. But I think looking now and watching my children watch me, I won this award from the University of Windsor, this Alumni Ambassador Award, and I was
Nice.
very honored to
Very
receive
nice.
it. My family was there, and you know, my sons said that I almost made them cry in my speech. And I said, oh, why is that? And they said, we just didn't know how hard you worked to get here. because I don't talk about it to them, right? I don't say, hey, I do this, I do this. And so it was a profound moment for me to hear that from their mouths, right?
Yes.
So it was interesting.
I agree. Do you think men have conceded the notion that we are, as women, we are as competitive as they are, you know, with respect, of course, to the socioeconomic growth?
You know, I had the benefit and the privilege of having a father who had me working with him. He owned and owns a series, you know, with my brother now they operate, but he was a mechanic and had a garage that we have in Canada with a Shell gas station, and I was 12 and he had me changing oil with him. And he had me pumping gas and doing, you know, everything a boy would do because he wanted to make sure that I was independent and that I was self-sufficient. And so, you know, people will often say, are you a feminist? Like, do you? And I say, no, not at all. And they'll say, yeah, but, you know, you're like a tomboy and you fix cars and you do these things. And, you know, someone will come over and I'll be painting my house. And they say, why are you, you know? So I think that, you know, growing up like that, I see the world a little differently. Right? So I cooked with my mom, I worked in the garage with my dad, right?
You roughened up at a young age,
yes,
though.
Yes. So what I say is that, you know, and my boys often will tease me and they'll say, do you think that, you know, women can do everything that men can do? And I say, look, I think that for, you know, there are certain things that women are better at and there are some things that men are better at. I think that depending on the person, and again, it goes back to the, what do you want? What do you want out of your life? How do you want to see yourself? You know, I faced a lot of instances of inequality because I was a woman.
That's what I wanted to ask you
Yes,
right
I
now.
knew where you were going with it, and I went around the table and came back again to it. But you know,
this is my
next
question.
I know. So you know, for me, what I try to do is not let that get in the way. I understand it. Right? So what do I mean by that?
What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So I know I'm a woman. I know that I'm Lebanese. I'm a visible minority. I often get mistaken for not being Lebanese, for being, you know, South American or
maybe
something.
Spanish.
Spanish. Yeah.
Yes.
People come, and so I understand that that's my situation. I don't use it as a crutch, meaning I don't rely on it to say, oh, I'm this, so therefore I should get this.
Does it
right?
empower you?
It doesn't empower me, but it doesn't hinder me.
Okay.
Meaning, I say, this is what I am. I know I'm going to walk into some boardrooms and I'm not going to be welcome. I'm not. I'm going to walk into others and I am going to be welcome. It's not going to stop me from what I'm trying to do.
So you feel like you prepare yourself?
Always.
Always?
Always.
Okay.
There are going to be times when, and there have been times where I walk in and they say, oh, you know, I've had people who, because of my...
Just like that.
Just like that, right? And so I say, well, this is what I know. You either want me to share my knowledge or you don't. And so I don't try to force myself somewhere where I don't belong and where I'm not welcome. But at the same time, I don't let somebody stop that from letting me demonstrate my abilities. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does make sense. It does make a lot of sense.
Okay.
I want to thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
I mean, we're very proud of you.
Thank you.
I'm very
And
proud of your
you.
work. I mean, the human trafficking is a big issue.
It is.
And you've been tackling that for a long time. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
And I cannot wait for the foundation to...
Thank you. I will keep you posted, Hanan,
yes,
for sure.
Yes, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And that's it for Heya. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.